Hey everyone, Mark Feldman here from Bang the Drum School. So today I want to do a quick lesson about traditional grip. Traditional grip is confusing to some people, particularly beginners. It's really straightforward actually. It seems weird and uncomfortable and strange, but I'm going to give you all the basics so that you understand exactly what to do in order to work on the motions and how to hold the stick and all the things you need in order to get working and rolling along with traditional grip, no pun intended. All right, so check it out. There are certain basic things about hand technique that apply no matter whether you're talking about match grip or traditional grip, and some of those things are where you hold the stick, right? So there's this balance point on the stick, and on these Vic Firth sticks, usually it's at this flag, the flag right here, which is, if you don't have Vic Firth sticks, it's basically, if you divide the stick into thirds, then you hold the stick 1/3 from the bottom, and that's the balance point. And the way you know that you've got the balance point correct is that the stick will bounce like crazy, basically. So if you hold the stick in that spot and you throw the stick, see, that's what I mean. It flies out of your hands because it the maximum amount of bounce that you can get from the stick is gained when you hold the stick at that balance point. Let me grab that stick. But now here's where everything is different, because everything else about traditional grip is really different from matched grip. So first of all, your starting position is like this, right? Right, so it's like a karate chop hand, and the movement that you make is turning your wrist like this, right? So you're rotating your forearm. In physiology, I believe it's the radius ulna. So you move the radius ulna inward, and that's your stroke, right? So it's really different from what you're used to doing with your wrist for match grip. So that's the basic movement. Now, the fulcrum is really different too, of course. So what you're going to do is you're going to take the stick at that fulcrum point, and then you're going to place it in between your thumb, in this fleshy part of your thumb right here, right? So in this fleshy part where your thumb meets your hand, that's where the stick will rest. So I place it in there like that. And basically what I want is, I want to get some control. I want the stick to be loose, because one of the advantages of traditional grip is that there's nothing on top, hardly anything on top of the stick at all, which means that the stick can really move easily. But you need it to stay in that little fleshy part, so you're going to have to squeeze a little bit. But when I say squeeze, there's no tension. You're just closing up a little bit here, like this. And then, if you want to start testing things out, just throw the stick down at your drum by making this movement. Right? So that's the basic stroke. In a way, it's really efficient. And once you get used to these movements being so different from stuff that you're not used to doing, or rather, once you get used to these movements being so different from what you're used to doing with your matched grip movements, it'll start to become comfortable. Just like any movement, in the beginning it's not going to be comfortable, but as you get into it and you practice, it'll start to get comfortable. So now, you're not going to always just play. You will sometimes play like this. If you want to make a big stroke, now when people talk about a traditional grip not being able to give you any power, I disagree, for the simple reason that you can see there are players who get a lot of power using traditional grip, and my favorite example of that is Virgil Donati. Virgil Donati often hits hard, and he uses traditional grip. And there are other drummers too, like Kaliuta and Weckel and Gadd and Steve Smith. There are a lot of people, Tony Williams, there are a lot of people who have used traditional grip. Many of them were inspirations to me and made me want to use the grip. But many of those people can play with power. And one of the ways you get power with traditional grip is simply to take your fingers off of the stick. So if you play with only your thumb on top, then nothing will impede the stick from coming up, right? The other way to play, the more common way of playing it is you'll get these two fingers on top, right? So you'll get the two fingers on top like this, and you'll keep the forefinger. You'll keep the forefinger and the middle finger over the top. Let's look at that over here, right? And so you start like this. You put your fingers on top, and that's really it. So when you want to go small to medium stroke, you keep these fingers on top. When you want to make a big stroke, you take those top fingers off. And honestly, there's not that much more to it. You just got to get used to this movement. You got to get used to this rotation. You got to get used to this fulcrum. And you just got to work on it. But here are some advantages. First of all, just look at the history of it. Now, there is some weird things about the history of it because this grip would not exist were it not for marching snare drummers in the army in war. And there's a long, long history of that going back very, very far. And that's why it exists, because people were holding their snare drums. They had their snare drums at an angle as they were walking, they were marching. And because of the angle of the snare drum, if this is the surface of the drum is like this, it didn't make sense to go like this. That would be really weird and awkward. So people played like this, and that made sense. Now, some people argued, well, when you come to real drums or a drum set, it doesn't make sense. But yes, it's weird. It wasn't invented for that purpose, but look at Buddy Rich and all the other names that I mentioned and check out their technique. It's hard to argue that you can't have great technique this way, and that's why I first learned it, right? So, those are the basics of traditional grip. And so try it out. Just use these basic ideas I mentioned to you. It's really simple. The grip, the fulcrum, the movement, how you place your fingers. Just get used to it. See if you like it, and try it out. And let me know what you think. That's it for me, Mark Feldman, signing off. Talk to you next time.